Admiral Marcus Thompson gripped the metal railing of the command deck as warning lights flashed red across the bridge of the UES Liberty. The massive view screen showed dozens of alien warships moving toward Earth's outer colonies like deadly, silver arrows cutting through the darkness of space. Their hulls gleamed with an otherworldly metal that seemed to bend light around it, making them appear almost ghost-like against the starfield. "Distance to enemy fleet?" Marcus asked, his voice steady despite the knots forming in his stomach. 40,000 kilometers and closing fast, sir," replied Lieutenant David Chen from his navigation console. The young officer's hands trembled slightly as he worked the controls. This was his first real battle, and everyone on the bridge knew it. Captain Lisa Rodriguez turned from her tactical station, her dark eyes reflecting the glow of multiple displays. She had served under Marcus for 8 years, through border skirmishes and pirate raids, but nothing like this. "Sir, they're broadcasting the same surrender message on all frequencies. Full submission to Galactic Council authority, immediate. Cessation of military activities, and tribute payment of 70% of our planetary resources." Marcus let out a bitter laugh. 70%. They want to leave us just enough to survive as their slaves. He walked to the center of the bridge, looking at each of his officers. "Tell them what we told them 3 months ago when they first showed up with their demands." Rodriguez nodded and activated the communications array. "This is the United Earth ship, Liberty, to the approaching Galactic Council fleet. Earth does not recognize your authority over human space. We will not submit. We will not pay tribute, and we will not kneel to any alien power. If you want our worlds, you'll have to take them." The response came immediately through the ship's speakers, a voice that sounded like grinding metal mixed with electronic harmony. "Humans of the third planet, your defiance has been noted. Pacification protocols will now commence. Surrender immediately or face complete destruction." Marcus studied the tactical display showing the positions of both fleets. The human forces consisted of 23 warships, mostly destroyers and cruisers, with a handful of battleships. The alien fleet numbered 47 vessels, each one radiating energy signatures that dwarfed anything in the human arsenal. Their weapons appeared to be some form of directed energy system, while their shields showed power levels that made human defensive systems look like paper umbrellas in a hurricane. "All ships, this is Admiral Thompson," he broadcast to the human fleet. "We know we're outgunned. We know their technology is better, but we also know something they don't. We're fighting for our home, our families, and our freedom. That means something." The first alien shots lit up space like miniature suns. Beams of brilliant blue energy lanced out from the council ships, striking the human vessels with devastating accuracy. The destroyer US Phoenix took a direct hit to its engine section and began tumbling out of control. "Atmosphere venting from multiple hull breaches. Return fire," Marcus ordered. "All weapons, full spread. Human missiles and projectile weapons," answered back, filling the void between the fleets with streaks of light and explosive flashes. The alien shields absorbed most of the impacts, but a few shots penetrated, scarring their perfect hulls with blackened craters. The battle raged for hours. The US Manchester exploded in a ball of white fire when its reactor core was breached. The cruiser US Boston lost its entire forward section, but kept fighting with its remaining guns. Human ships that should have retreated when critically damaged instead pressed their attacks, closing to point-blank range where their inferior weapons could do more damage. Captain Tom Wilson commanded the destroyer US Defiance from the thick of the fighting. His ship had taken severe damage, with half his crew dead and his engines failing. Smoke filled the bridge, and sparks showered from damaged control panels. "Sir, we've lost main power," reported his weapons officer, Sergeant Kelly Murphy, blood running down her face from a head wound. "Life support is failing, and we have fires on decks 3 through 7. Wilson looked at the tactical display showing the alien flagship, a massive vessel 3 times the size of any human ship. It hung in space like a predatory sea creature, its weapons systematically destroying human vessels one by one. "Set course for that flagship," Wilson ordered quietly. "Sir." Murphy stared at him in confusion. "You heard me. Ramming speed. Emergency power to engines." The bridge crew exchanged glances. They understood what their captain was asking. Lieutenant James Park at the navigation station was the first to respond. "Course laid in, sir." Ramming. Speed. The UES Defiance turned toward the alien flagship, its damaged engines pushing the destroyer forward through the debris field of destroyed ships. Alien weapons focused on the approaching human vessel, tearing chunks from its hull, but Wilson's ship kept coming. On the alien flagship, Commander Vexdary watched the damaged human destroyer approach. The massive alien had conquered 17 different species across 40 campaigns, each one surrendering when faced with the Council's superior firepower. He had studied human tactics for months, expecting them to follow standard military doctrine: retreat when overwhelmed, negotiate when cornered, surrender when defeat was certain. This was different. The human ship was clearly dying, its crew probably dead or dying, yet it continued its impossible charge. Vexary's four eyes widened as he realized what the humans intended. "Destroy that vessel immediately," he commanded in his native language, a series of harmonic tones that his translator converted to standard galactic. Energy beams hammered the UAZ's Defiance, tearing away armor plating and venting atmosphere, but the destroyer refused to die. It struck the alien flagship at full speed, its remaining nuclear warheads detonating on impact. The explosion lit up the battlefield like a newborn star, destroying both ships in a brilliant flash that temporarily blinded sensors across both fleets. The alien fleet paused its attack, confused by what they had witnessed. In all their campaigns, no enemy had ever deliberately destroyed their own ship to inflict damage. It violated every principle of civilized warfare. Marcus watched the explosion fade on his view screen, feeling a mixture of pride and grief for Tom Wilson and his crew. All ships, continue the attack. Make their sacrifice count. Commander Vexary stared at the expanding debris cloud where his flagship sister ship had been moments before. For the first time in his long military career, he felt something. He didn't recognize uncertainty. These humans fought with a ferocity that seemed almost insane, throwing away tactical advantages and military doctrine in favor of pure aggression. The human fleet had lost 11 ships, while the aliens had lost only 3, but something had changed in the dynamic of the battle. The Council forces found themselves hesitating before engaging damaged human vessels, unsure whether each one might be another floating bomb waiting to explode as the battle continued. Vexary began to understand that this campaign would be unlike any other. These humans didn't just fight to win. They fought as if defeat was simply not an option they were willing to consider. Commander Jake Miller stood in the cargo bay of what appeared to be a standard civilian transport ship, watching his team make final preparations. The vessel looked exactly like thousands of other refugee ships fleeing Earth's outer colonies, complete with fake distress signals and fabricated passenger manifests. But hidden beneath the ordinary exterior, every cargo container had been gutted and filled with high-explosive warheads. "How long until the alien patrol finds us?" Miller asked his communications officer, Lieutenant Beth Anderson. "Their scanner sweep should detect us in about 10 minutes, she replied, monitoring the alien frequencies. "They're following the same pattern they've used for the last 2 weeks. Board the ship, check for weapons, then either destroy it or let it pass." Miller nodded grimly. The Galactic Council forces had been systematically stopping human civilian vessels, claiming they needed to prevent weapons smuggling. What they really wanted was to terrorize the human population into submission. Today, they would learn that terror worked both ways. The transport ship U.S. Mercy drifted dead in space, its engines cold and life support systems running on minimum power. Through the viewports, the crew could see the sleek alien patrol vessel approaching, its blue scanning beams washing over the human ship like searchlights. "Remember, act scared but cooperative," Miller told his team. "Let them think we're just desperate refugees trying to escape to the inner system."
Ow.
The alien ship docked with a metallic clang that echoed through the Mercy's hull. Miller and his crew took their positions throughout the ship, some hiding in cargo areas, while others posed as frightened civilians in the passenger compartments. The airlock hissed open, and 6 alien soldiers entered the ship. They stood nearly 8 feet tall, covered in natural armor plating that gleamed like polished stone. Their weapons resembled crystalline spears that hummed with contained energy. The lead soldier, identified by extra markings on his armor, spoke through a translation device that made his voice sound hollow and mechanical. This vessel will be searched for contraband materials. All occupants will remain in designated areas during inspection. Miller, dressed in civilian clothes and carrying fake identification papers, approached the alien patrol leader with his hands raised. "Please, we're just trying to reach Mars. We have women and children aboard." The alien soldier ignored him, gesturing for his team to spread throughout the ship. They moved with practiced efficiency, their scanners checking every compartment and storage area. Miller watched nervously as one soldier approached a cargo container that held enough explosives to vaporize half the ship. "What is the contents of this container?" the alien demanded. "Medical supplies," Miller replied quickly. "Antibiotics and surgical equipment for the Mars colonies." The scanner beam played over the container for several long seconds. Miller held his breath, hoping. The human engineers had been correct about their ability to fool alien sensors. The explosive charges were wrapped in materials designed to mimic medical equipment, complete with fake power signatures and chemical traces. The alien moved on to the next container. Miller allowed himself to breathe again. For 20 minutes, the search continued. The aliens checked passenger compartments, examined the ship's computer logs, and tested samples from the water recycling system. Finally, their leader spoke into his communication device in his native language, before turning back to Miller. "This vessel is cleared for passage. Maintain current course to Mars orbital zone." The alien patrol began filing back toward their ship. Miller waited until the last soldier was almost through the airlock before activating the explodinator hidden in his pocket. The explosion turned both ships into expanding clouds of superheated plasma and twisted metal. The blast was visible from 3 different human observation posts, each one recording the destruction for broadcast throughout human space. Meanwhile, on Mars, Captain Emma Davis sat in a hidden communication center buried deep beneath the planet's polar ice cap. Banks of transmitters and signal amplifiers surrounded her workstation, all focused on one task: getting her message to every corner of the galaxy. "This is Free Mars Radio, broadcasting to all oppressed peoples of the galaxy." Emma spoke into the microphone, her voice steady and clear. "For too long, you have lived under the boot of the Galactic Council. You have been told that resistance is useless, that their superior technology makes them invincible." She paused, looking at the video footage of the transport ship explosion, playing on her monitor. "Today, humans showed the galaxy something different. We showed you that the powerful can be hurt. We showed you that courage matters more than advanced weapons." Emma's broadcasts had been reaching alien worlds for over a week now, carried by hijacked communication satellites and smuggled transmission equipment. Intelligence reports suggested that her words were having an unexpected effect on the Council's slave species. "On the mining world of Kepler 44b, the Threnody workers have stopped reporting to their overseers," she continued. "On Proxima Centauri C, the Zalani farmers are hiding their food harvests instead of shipping them to Council worlds." Small acts of defiance, but they add up. The broadcast was interrupted by an urgent message from her technical officer, Sergeant Mike Rodriguez. "Captain, we're picking up alien ships moving to intercept our signal. They've triangulated our position." Emma nodded calmly. "How long do we have?" "Maybe 30 minutes before they can target this facility. Then we keep broadcasting for 29 minutes. Emma turned back to her microphone. "To the Vorthon slaves on Tau Ceti, to the Krell workers on Wolf 359, to every species that dreams of freedom, watch what humans do next. Learn from us. When they come for you with their superior weapons and their threats, remember that fear is just another prison." Across human space, other resistance cells were implementing similarly unconventional tactics. The asteroid mining station series had been converted into a massive railgun, using its ore processing equipment to launch tungsten projectiles at alien ships passing through the belt. The projectiles traveled at nearly 10% of light speed, making them impossible to intercept and devastating on impact. Space Station Armstrong. Orbiting Jupiter, had become a weapons factory, producing mines disguised as navigation beacons. When alien ships tried to use them for position fixes, the beacons exploded, damaging engines and communication systems, most disturbing to the alien command structure. Human tactics were spreading beyond human space. On distant worlds, alien species that had been conquered centuries ago were suddenly remembering what rebellion looked like. Factory workers on Council industrial worlds began sabotaging production lines. Transport crews started losing cargo shipments. Even some alien military units reported discipline problems as soldiers questioned orders. Admiral Vexthari received these reports in his command chamber aboard the massive Council dreadnought, Absolute Authority. The chamber's walls displayed tactical maps showing the current military situation. But the data was becoming increasingly confusing. Explain to me again why our casualty rates are increasing while our tactical victories remain constant, he demanded of his intelligence officer. The humans refuse to acknowledge defeat even when their positions are overrun. The officer replied, his tentacles writhing with anxiety. They convert civilian infrastructure into military assets. They use their own deaths as weapons. Most concerning, their broadcasts are inspiring rebellion among our subject species. Vexthari studied the reports with growing unease. In 40 campaigns across 17 different species, he had never encountered an enemy that fought this way. Military doctrine assumed that conquered peoples would accept their fate once faced with overwhelming force. These humans seemed to view overwhelming force as just another obstacle to overcome. Increase jamming of their communication signals, he ordered, and begin preparing for total occupation of all human worlds. It appears these creatures will not accept civilized surrender. Admiral Sarah Mitchell floated in the zero-gravity command center, buried 3 kilometers beneath the moon's surface, surrounded by displays showing the positions of alien warships throughout the solar system. The Galactic Council had deployed over 200 vessels in a perfect sphere around Sol, each one positioned to intercept any ship trying to leave or enter human space. They called it a siege, but Sarah knew it was really a trap designed to starve humanity into submission. Many days of supplies do we have left? She asked her logistics officer, Commander Paul Anderson. At current consumption rates, about 4 months for the outer colonies, 6 months for Mars, and 8 months for Earth, he replied, checking his tablet. But those numbers assume we're not feeding the construction crews working around the clock. Sarah nodded, watching a live feed from the moon's surface, where thousands of workers in environmental suits were installing the final components of the massive railgun system. The weapons stretched across nearly 50 kilometers of lunar terrain, using electromagnetic fields to accelerate projectiles to incredible speeds. Each shot could punch through the heaviest alien armor, but the system required enormous amounts of power and could only fire once every 6 minutes. Status report from Captain Clark at the asteroid belt. Lieutenant Jennifer Murphy consulted her communication logs. His teams have finished converting 43 asteroids into weapon platforms. Each one looks like natural rock from the outside. They're packed with missile launchers, particle beam cannons, and nuclear mines. The aliens have no idea they're flying through the galaxy's largest minefield. The strategy was simple but dangerous. Instead of trying to break the alien blockade, humanity was turning the entire solar system into a fortress. Every moon, asteroid, and space station was being converted into a weapons platform. The aliens thought they were containing humanity, but they were actually giving humans time to prepare the most elaborate defensive system in galactic history. Captain Robert Clark supervised the conversion of asteroid designation 2087 Bravo from his mobile command ship. The rock was nearly 2 kilometers across, large enough to house a full missile battery and a crew of 50 technicians. His engineering teams had spent 3 weeks hollowing out the interior, installing weapon systems, and covering everything with a layer of natural rock that would fool alien scanners. "How many more asteroids do we need to convert?" asked his second-in-command, Lieutenant Karen Davis. "As many as possible before they figure out what we're doing," Clark replied, studying the tactical display. "Each converted asteroid gives us another chance to hurt them when they finally decide to attack." The work was dangerous and exhausting. Engineers had to operate in vacuum suits for hours at a time, installing delicate equipment while drifting in zero gravity. Several workers had been lost to equipment failures or accidents, but the work continued without pause. Everyone understood that their survival depended on completing the fortress before the aliens lost patience with the siege. On Jupiter's moon Europa, shipyards worked 24 hours a day, producing a new type of vessel that would have horrified military strategists from any civilized species. The ships were little more than engines strapped to nuclear warheads, designed for one mission: ramming enemy vessels at maximum velocity. They had no shields, minimal life support, and crew compartments barely large enough for a single pilot. Lieutenant Commander Tony Wilson inspected the latest batch of kamikaze ships. Each one painted matte black to reduce visibility against the SHE. Darkness of space. "How many pilots have volunteered for the suicide missions?" he asked his personnel officer. "Over 3,000 so far, sir. We have enough volunteers to crew every ship we can build." Wilson shook his head in amazement. Any other species, asking for volunteers for certain death missions, would result in empty recruitment offices. Among humans, they had to turn people away. But the most shocking development was happening far beyond the solar system. On alien worlds that had been conquered generations ago, Lieutenant Colonel Amanda Foster led a team of 12 human volunteers who had somehow managed to slip past the alien blockade in a modified stealth ship. Their mission was unprecedented in galactic warfare: teach revolution to alien slave species. Foster crouched in the ruins of a factory complex on the mining world. Kepler 186f, speaking quietly to a group of reptilian aliens called the Threnody. The creatures had been enslaved by the Galactic Council for over 2 centuries, forced to extract rare minerals from dangerous underground mines. "The key to successful sabotage is making it look like accidents," she explained through a translation. "Device, damaged equipment, power failures, contaminated or shipments. The Council can't punish you for accidents." One of the Threnody workers, his scale scarred from years of mining work, raised a clawed hand. "But they will send investigators. They will discover our deception." "Not if you're smart about it," Foster replied. "Humans have been fighting authority for thousands of years. We know how to make rebellion look like incompetence." She opened a case filled with small electronic devices. "These are timer-controlled electromagnetic pulse generators. Plant them near critical systems. Set the timers for random intervals. And they'll cause equipment failures that look completely natural. The Council's investigators will blame poor maintenance or design flaws." The training sessions continued for weeks as Foster's team moved from world to world, spreading techniques of passive resistance and sabotage. They taught the Krell farmers on Wolf 359 how to contaminate food shipments without detection. They showed the Vorthon factory workers on Tau Ceti how to introduce flaws into manufactured goods that wouldn't be discovered until the products failed in use. Most importantly, they taught these species something the Galactic Council had spent centuries trying to destroy hope back in the Sol system. Alien commanders were beginning to realize that their siege was not having the intended effect. Instead of weakening human resolve, the blockade seemed to be giving humans time to prepare increasingly elaborate defenses. Admiral Vextheri studied intelligence reports in his command chamber aboard the dreadnought Absolute Authority. The reports painted a disturbing picture of systematic rebellion spreading across Council territory. "Industrial production on 17 worlds has declined by an average of 30%, his intelligence officer reported. Food shipments from agricultural worlds are arriving contaminated or spoiled. 3 separate mining operations have suffered catastrophic equipment failures." "And you believe these events are connected to human activity?" the timing suggests. "Coordination, sir. All of these problems began shortly after we established the blockade around the human system." Vexeri's 4 eyes narrowed as he considered the implications. The siege was supposed to isolate humanity, cutting them off from the galaxy while they slowly starved into submission. Instead, it appeared that humans had somehow managed to export their rebellion to alien worlds throughout Council space. "How is this possible? Our blockade is complete. Human ships have escaped the system. We believe small teams may have infiltrated our territory before the blockade was established, sir. They appear to be organizing resistance movements among our subject species." The alien admiral felt something he had never experienced in 40 campaigns: the possibility of defeat. These humans were fighting a type of war that violated every principle of civilized military doctrine. They weren't trying to win through superior firepower or tactical brilliance. They were winning by convincing other species to fight alongside them. "Prepare for full-scale assault on the human system," Vexeri ordered. "We cannot allow this rebellion to spread further." But even as he gave the order, reports continued arriving from across the galaxy. Factory explosions on industrial worlds, crop failures on agricultural planets, and most disturbing of all, alien military units reporting discipline problems as soldiers began questioning their orders. The Siege of Sol had become something unprecedented. In galactic history, a prison that locked the jailers inside with their most dangerous prisoners. The massive alien dreadnought, Absolute Authority, shuddered as it pushed through the wreckage of humanity's outer defensive line. Admiral Vexeri watched from his command bridge as his fleet finally entered the inner solar system after months of siege warfare. The humans had fought harder than any species in galactic history. Their primitive technology could not match Council firepower forever. "Casualties from the breakthrough?" asked his tactical officer. 47 ships destroyed or heavily damaged, sir." The human defensive positions were more heavily fortified than our intelligence suggested. Vexeri nodded grimly. Even in defeat, these humans had cost him nearly a quarter of his fleet. But now the real conquest could begin. Forces would occupy the human worlds, establish Council authority, and put an end to the rebellion that was spreading across the galaxy. The first landing parties descended toward Earth's surface, expecting to find broken defenders and terrified civilians ready to surrender. Instead, they found something that would haunt alien military doctrine for centuries to come. Captain Steve Anderson crouched in the ruins of downtown Denver, watching alien dropships descend through the smoke-filled sky like metallic locusts. His unit had been fighting for 18 hours straight, but they were far from finished. Around him, his soldiers made final preparations for the next phase of the battle. "Deploy the eyes," he ordered into his communication headset. Throughout the city, dozens of metallic figures emerged from hidden bunkers and basement shelters. They looked almost human at first glance, but their movements were too precise, their reactions too fast. These artificial constructs had been humanity's most closely guarded secret. Combat units that combined human tactical thinking with machine reflexes and endurance. The first alien patrol entered the city, expecting to find cowering civilians. Instead, they encountered AI soldiers who could calculate the trajectory of every shot, predict enemy movements with computer precision, and fight continuously without rest or fear. The battle that followed was unlike anything in the Aliens. Experience.AI unit designation, Charlie 7, moved through the rubble-strewn streets with mechanical efficiency. Its optical sensors tracked 17 different targets simultaneously, while its tactical processor calculated optimal firing solutions. When alien soldiers took cover behind a damaged vehicle, the AI unit threw a grenade with mathematical precision, the explosive landing exactly where maximum damage would occur. But the artificial soldiers were only the beginning of humanity's surprises. Mrs. Helen Martinez had been a high school chemistry teacher for 35 years before the invasion began. Now she sat in the pilot seat of a converted civilian aircraft, its cargo bay filled with homemade explosives and metal fragments. At 62 years old, she had volunteered for a mission that would almost certainly end her life. Target acquired. She spoke into her radio, watching the massive alien supply convoy moving along the highway below. Beginning attack run. Her improvised bomber dove toward the alien vehicles, automated defense systems filling the air around her with energy beams and projectile fire. The old teacher held her course steady, waiting until the last possible moment before triggering the detonation sequence. The explosion vaporized 3 alien supply trucks and damaged 5 others. But more importantly, it sent a message that echoed across the battlefield. No human was too old, too young, or too civilian to be a threat. In the basement of Roosevelt Elementary School, 12-year-old Kevin Brooks and his classmates worked with focused intensity on their assigned project. Their teacher, Mr. David Wilson, supervised as they assembled improvised explosive devices using materials scavenged from the school's science laboratory and maintenance supplies. Remember, the timer needs to be set for at least 30 seconds after activation, Wilson instructed. That gives you time to get to safety before detonation. The children had volunteered for the resistance like adults, understanding that their survival depended on making the alien occupation as costly as possible. They were too young to use conventional weapons effectively, but they could build bombs, carry messages, and gather intelligence by moving through areas where adult resistance fighters would be detected. Kevin finished assembling his device and held it up for inspection. The bomb was small enough to fit in a school backpack, but powerful enough to destroy an alien patrol vehicle. Tomorrow, he would plant it along a route used by enemy supply convoys at City General Hospital. The invasion had turned medical facilities into fortresses. Dr. Patricia Chen coordinated her staff from the intensive care unit, where patients who couldn't be evacuated continued their treatment while preparing for battle. How many of the bedridden patients want weapons? She asked her head nurse, Lieutenant Colonel Jennifer Murphy, who had taken leave from the military to help organize hospital defenses. All of them, doctor. Even the ones in critical condition are asking for grenades. They can detonate if alien troops enter their rooms. Dr. Chen looked at her patients with a mixture of pride and sadness. These people were dying from their injuries, but they still wanted to contribute to humanity's defense. An elderly man with severe burns asked for a pistol he could barely hold. A woman with spinal injuries wanted explosives she could trigger from her hospital bed. The aliens had expected to find vulnerable civilians in the hospital. Instead, they would encounter patients who viewed their own deaths as opportunities to inflict casualties on the enemy. Captain Anderson received reports from across the city. It painted a picture of total warfare beyond anything in galactic history. Nanobots had been released into the water supply. Microscopic machines that would infiltrate alien equipment and consume it from the inside. Matter converters hidden in abandoned buildings were transforming rubble and debris into ammunition for human weapons, most disturbing to the alien forces. Every building in the city had become a potential weapon. Entire apartment complexes were rigged to collapse on command, burying alien troops under tons of concrete and steel. Office buildings had been converted into giant bomb factories where civilians worked around the clock producing explosives. The invasion fleet's commander received increasingly frantic reports from his ground forces. Landing sites that appeared secure would suddenly erupt in violence as hidden humans emerged from tunnels and basement shelters. Supply lines were constantly under attack by enemies, who seemed to appear from nowhere and disappear just as quickly. General Patricia Williams commanded the Central Resistance from a bunker complex beneath the Rocky Mountains. Her command center coordinated attacks across 3 continents, but she knew the aliens were closing in on her position. Seismic sensors detected enemy tunneling machines approaching from multiple directions. How long until they breached the main bunker? She asked her intelligence officer. Maybe 20 minutes, General? Should we attempt evacuation? Williams looked around the command center at her staff. Dozens of men and women who had devoted their lives to defending humanity. They could try to escape through emergency tunnels, but the aliens would eventually hunt them down. There was another option, one that would ensure their deaths served a purpose. Signal all units to continue operations under local command, she ordered. All personnel prepare for final protocol implementation. Her staff understood immediately. The command bunker contained a fusion reactor that could be overloaded to create a massive explosion. The blast would destroy the facility and everyone in it. But it would also eliminate the alien forces, preparing to assault their position. When alien troops finally broke through the bunker's outer defenses, they found empty corridors and abandoned equipment. Humans had vanished, leaving only a ticking countdown timer on the reactor control panel. Admiral Vexeri felt the shockwave from the explosion, even aboard his flagship in orbit. The blast was visible from space, a brief sun. That marked the location where an entire alien division had simply ceased to exist. Casualty report, he demanded, though he already knew the answer would be devastating. Complete loss of the assault force, sir. Over 2,000 troops, plus all their equipment and vehicles. The alien commander stared at the tactical displays, showing similar reports from battlefields across the human worlds. His forces weren't fighting an army or even a species. They were fighting an idea that had infected every human mind: the absolute refusal to accept defeat under any circumstances, for the first time in his career. Admiral Vexeri began to wonder if some enemies were too dangerous to conquer, even when victory seemed certain. Captain Daniel Brooks floated in the cramped command module of the salvaged alien scout ship, watching Earth burn through the viewport. The blue marble that had been humanity's home for millennia was now covered in orange flames and black smoke. Clouds, cities lay in ruins, forests had been reduced to ash, and the oceans boiled with the heat from orbital bombardment. The Galactic Council had finally achieved their victory, but Daniel knew this was only the beginning. He asked his communications officer, Lieutenant Amy Thompson, who monitored radio frequencies from hiding. "Spots throughout the solar system? Maybe 300 vessels total, sir? Most are damaged civilian transports carrying refugees, but we also have 50 military ships that managed to slip through the blockade during the final battle." Daniel nodded, studying the tactical display showing scattered human survivors throughout the galaxy. The alien fleet had expected the fall of Earth to end human resistance, but they had never understood how humans thought about war. Defeat was not the end of a conflict. It was just the beginning of a different kind of fight. "Send the activation signal to all sleeper cells," he ordered. "Operation Phoenix begins now." For months, human volunteers had been infiltrating alien worlds, using stolen ships and forged identification documents. They had posed as traders, refugees, and technical workers, while secretly establishing hidden bases and recruiting alien sympathizers. The Galactic Council had been so focused on conquering human space that they had ignored the enemy already spreading throughout their empire. On the industrial world of Kepler 44-b, Master Sergeant Lisa Martinez emerged from her hiding place in the abandoned mining tunnels where she had spent the last 6 weeks. Her mission was to coordinate the slave uprising that would begin the next phase of humanity's war against the Galactic Council. She made her way through the underground passages to a secret meeting point, where representatives from 12 different alien species waited in the darkness. The Threnody workers with their scaled skin and yellow eyes, the insectoid Krell with their chitinous armor and compound eyes, the plant-like Vorthan, whose bodies swayed like trees in an invisible wind. Tall of them had been enslaved by the Council for generations, but now they were ready to fight back. "Earth has fallen," Martinez announced to the gathered aliens. "The Galactic Council thinks they have won, but they have made a terrible mistake. They have shown the galaxy what happens when you refuse to submit to their authority." One of the Threnody representatives, a scarred veteran of the mining operations, spoke through his translation device. "But humans are defeated. Your world is destroyed. How can this inspire others to resist?" Martinez smiled grimly. "Because we're still here. Because even after losing everything, we didn't surrender. We scattered across the galaxy like seeds on the wind, and now we're going to grow into something the Council never expected." She opened a case filled with small electronic devices and weapons components. "These are the tools of rebellion: communication jammers, explosive charges, computer viruses designed to crash alien systems. But the most important weapon is something you already have." "What is that?" asked a Vorthan delegate, his bark-like skin rustling with curiosity. "The knowledge that the Council can be hurt, that their technology and their power are not absolute. Humans proved that a supposedly inferior species can fight back and make their oppressors pay a terrible price." Similar meetings were taking place on dozens of worlds throughout Council space. Human infiltrators emerged from hiding to coordinate resistance movements that had been quietly growing for months. They brought with them not just weapons and tactical knowledge, but something far more dangerous: proof that rebellion was possible. Admiral Jennifer Hayes commanded the human fleet from the bridge of the captured Council dreadnought Liberation, a massive warship that her forces had taken during the final battle for Earth. The ship's original alien crew had been replaced with humans and alien volunteers who had joined the resistance movement. "Communications, Are we ready for the galaxy-wide broadcast? She asked her technical officer, Commander Robert Wilson. All hijacked satellites and communication relays are standing by, Admiral. We can reach every inhabited system in Council space simultaneously. Hayes stood before the recording equipment, knowing that her words would be heard on thousands of worlds within the next few hours. She had chosen her message carefully, understanding that this broadcast might be humanity's most important weapon. Citizens of the galaxy, this is Admiral Jennifer Hayes of the Human Liberation Fleet. She began, her voice steady and clear. The Galactic Council told you that Earth has fallen, that human resistance has been crushed. This is true. Our world burns, our cities lie in ruins, and millions of our people are dead. She paused, letting the weight of those words sink in before continuing. But we are still here. We are still fighting. We want you to understand what this means. The Council's most powerful fleet, their most advanced weapons, their most experienced commanders, all focused on destroying a single species that had barely learned to travel between the stars. And even then, even with all their advantages, they paid a price that will haunt them for generations. The broadcast continued as Hayes described the true cost of the Council's victory. Over half their invasion fleet had been destroyed or damaged. Entire divisions of ground troops had been wiped out by human civilians who turned their own deaths into weapons. Most importantly, the war had inspired rebellion throughout the galaxy. The Council wanted to teach us about galactic civilization, Hayes continued. They wanted to show us our place in their empire. Instead, we taught them something they had forgotten. We taught them that some things are worth dying for, that freedom is not a privilege granted by the powerful, but a right that must be defended by the brave. On alien worlds throughout the galaxy, the broadcast was having exactly the effect Hayes had intended. Species that had accepted Council domination for centuries began to remember what independence felt like. Factory workers started sabotaging production lines. Agricultural worlds began hiding their harvests. Even some alien military units reported discipline problems as soldiers questioned their orders. The psychological impact was devastating to Council authority. If humans, with their primitive technology and short lifespans, could inflict such damage on the Galactic Empire, what could other species accomplish if they worked together? Colonel Mark Stevens broadcast the final human message from a bombed-out shelter beneath the ruins of New York City. He was one of the last resistance fighters still alive on Earth, and he knew alien forces were closing in on his position. He had one more weapon to deploy before his death. This is Colonel Mark Stevens, final commander of the Earth Defense Force. He spoke into his emergency transmitter. To the aliens listening to this message, I want you to understand something important. You didn't defeat us today. You created us. His words were being recorded and transmitted throughout human space, where they would be broadcast on stolen alien communication networks for months to come. For centuries, humans fought each other over territory, resources, and ideas. We were divided by nationality, religion, and politics.
Oh.
But you gave us something we had never possessed before, a common enemy that threatened our entire species. You united us in a way we could never unite ourselves. Stevens looked out through a crack. In the shelter wall at the alien patrol ships searching through the rubble, every human child who survives this war will grow up knowing that freedom must be defended. Every human settlement throughout the galaxy will remember this day and prepare for the next fight. You wanted to conquer us, but instead you transformed us into something far more dangerous than we ever were before. The transmission ended as alien troops finally located Stevens' position. The explosion that followed could be seen from orbit, marking the end of organized resistance on Earth, but the beginning of something far more threatening to the Galactic Council. Throughout the galaxy, the seeds of rebellion continued to grow. Alien species that had never questioned Council authority began to organize strikes, sabotage operations, and underground resistance movements. The empire that had seemed stable for millennia suddenly faced the possibility of complete collapse. Humanity had lost the war for Earth, but in losing they had weaponized the very concept of freedom itself.